Hello people, welcome back to Story, Crime, and Wine. Today is yet another video about creepy people. The world is creepy because of the people. If you like content like this, if you like what you hear, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I don't plan on stopping this anytime soon. Go ahead, also give it a like, and hit the bell because you never know when a post will strike when you need it most. Go ahead and grab a glass of wine or water or whatever you need, and let's get started. At the time of this story, I was 21 and living in a major Midwestern city, attending the university there. Having lived there for only 1 month before my story began, I had witnessed a train stop stabbing, been yelled at by a crackhead, had a homeless guy follow me and threatened to choke me outside the physics building on campus, and watched a 13-car cop raid on a drug house just across the street. The area around the university is known for being rough and has a notoriously high rate of crime. We would get a few texts a week from the campus police saying things like there had been a robbery, a break-in, an assault, stalkings, attempted kidnappings, etc. I always ignored these texts, thinking foolishly that I would never be a victim, because I was smart enough to stay out of trouble, not go out alone late at night, all the cliches. I seriously regret this behavior now, and to anyone listening to this, please never think that you're 100% safe, no matter your level of preparedness. Always do your best to stay observant and careful. The first incident wasn't too unusual. I was just a block or two from my apartment building one day in the early evening. It was still light outside. I was walking my dog Sesame, a cute Shiba Inu who just looks like a fluffy, goofy puppy, and has never been frightening or particularly protective in his life. As I was heading back home, I passed a small parking lot and in it a large van. I could see a man in his early 60s sitting in the driver's seat smoking a cigarette. He was staring at me. As I passed, he actually leaned out of his car and called out to me, "Hey, you there. That's a cute dog. What's his name?" I should mention, this isn't even my first story like this. I have a pretty intense fear of strangers and actually struggle with PTSD from other incidents in my life. Being pretty wary for this reason, I ignored him and just walked faster. I heard a car door shut behind me and turned quickly to see that he had gotten out of his van and was slowly walking toward me. He called out to me again, "Hey baby, I just want to see your dog. Come back." His phrasing pissed me off and I gripped my dog's leash and started to speed walk away from him, starting to feel nervous. My heart was beginning to pound, but I kept telling myself over and over that I was overreacting. It was just my paranoia acting up and there was nothing to worry about. Boy, was I wrong. I managed to turn the corner and was about to cross the final park before getting to my apartment. In my fear over the van guy, I wasn't paying attention as much as I usually do to what was in front of me. I looked back over my shoulder, and the guy had stopped following me. He was, however, standing in the middle of the sidewalk with a huge, creepy grin on his face. I whirled back around with my eyes glued to my building. I only needed to walk another half a block and I'd be home. I was going to get away from him and his creepy van. Just when I thought I was safe, a group of 5 or 6 men came from the side of the park I wasn't watching. They were all tall and intimidating in stature, and all of them were laughing and looking right at me. Out of the corner of my eye, the van guy had started walking toward me as well. I remember he was whistling. I again picked up my pace and desperately searched for my keys in my pocket as I hurried to the door. The group of men then veered towards me, partially cutting me off, and in all my stupid politeness, I stopped. They grinned at me with sick, perverted smiles, obviously checking me out, looking up and down my body. It made me sick. I tried not to panic and inched closer to my apartment. "Hey, what's your name? Where are you going? What's your Snapchat? Is that your apartment? Can we come over? Do you smoke?" They all barraged me with questions, one after another. I tried to refuse them, stammering, No thank you," as I saw the van guy come and join their group, leering at me. While I inched away, they inched closer. One of them then reached out for me, his fingers actually touching my arm. I leapt back, trying not to start crying, but Sesame suddenly lunged at them, his teeth bared, a horrifying snarl ripping from his throat. Every bit of cute Shiba personality was gone, and he looked like he wanted to tear one of these guys' throats out. It startled them enough that I was able to turn and sprint the final distance to my building, locking the door behind me. I fell to the floor inside my building, hugging Sesame. However, the entire front of my building was glass, and to my horror and disbelief, the group of men came and stood in front of the windows, grinning at me, laughing, and making kissy faces and lewd gestures at me. The apartment manager came out and called the cops on them, but they ran away. I made it back home and scrubbed myself in the shower, crying and shaking with fear. Sesame got a special dinner that evening, and I kept telling myself that they just wanted to mess with me, and I was never in any real danger. Stupid of me, I know now. About a month later, when I had finally managed to be able to walk outside my apartment without severe anxiety, I was actually planning on moving a bit further away from campus. It was still going to be in a sketchy neighborhood, but the thought of those men knowing where I lived kept me up at night. My apartment actually hired a security guard to be there 24/7 after someone had broken into the building, smashed all the windows, destroyed some of the furniture, and stolen a bunch of bikes. Of course, my bike got stolen too. Anyways, I was heading home from class, and it was a beautiful day. I actually felt pretty happy for once, and popped my earbuds in on the last few blocks before I got home. Stupid, I know. After a block or so, I started to feel like someone was watching me. My palms started sweating. I glanced behind me, trying not to look obvious, and a tall man was about 20 feet behind me, staring straight at me. I snapped my head back around and ripped out my earbuds. No, I thought. It can't be one of them. I was just jumping to conclusions given my anxiety disorder and paranoia, surely, but there was something familiar about him. My heart started racing, as I hoped to God the others weren't waiting for me around the corner of my building, ready to jump me. I walked faster, wishing Sesame was with me. I was too afraid to look back at him as I fumbled with my keys and wrenched the door open as hard as I could. This turned out to be a crucial mistake. As I ran to the elevator, trying to breathe a sigh of relief, I saw with absolute horror that the man had caught the door I had thrown wide open and was slowly coming into the building with me. He paused, standing away from me, but close enough that I could hear his ragged breathing and smell alcohol coming off him. My heart was thudding in my chest now, and I struggled to think clearly. The apartment manager was already home for the day, and I was completely alone in the lobby. There were no other doors out of that room, and the stranger was blocking my way to the door. The security guard supposed to be keeping an eye on the building was nowhere to be seen. The elevator came, and I tried to run into it and slam my hand over the door close button as fast as I could. I pushed my floor button and huddled in the far corner of the elevator. I started to once again try to catch my breath, but right when the door was almost closed, he stuck his hand in. I couldn't believe it. He waited until the door was just about to close, and then he stopped it. He was standing close enough that there was no way that was a mistake. My stomach dropped and a suffocating sense of dread crept in. I kept my head down as he joined me. My desperate hope that he was just a dirty, drunken resident of the building was dashed when he didn't press any buttons. I don't know why I didn't run out of the elevator or try to leave the building again. I was paralyzed with fear, and all I could do was watch as the door closed and sealed my fate. The elevator was filled with the stench of alcohol and BO. If I wasn't so terrified, I may have gagged. It was nauseating. I couldn't look at him. I couldn't move. I tried to scream at myself in my head to press the wrong button and try to escape him, but I was completely petrified. He leaned closer to me, and I heard him breathe in deeply and very quietly sigh, like he was content. I felt tears in my eyes, and the seconds it took to reach the top floor where I lived felt like hours. I saw no way I could escape the sick, drunk guy who was smelling me. In the reflection of the elevator walls, I could make out his disgusting smile. He was staring directly at me, his hands in his pockets, clearly holding onto something. I'm not religious, but I prayed that I would make it to my door in time. I realized he probably wasn't going to attack me in the elevator. There was a large camera in the ceiling. I looked up at it, feeling a tear spill out of my eye as I did so, hoping that whoever saw the tape eventually would identify this man. The worst part of all of this is that I've trained in martial arts and self-defense since I was about 8 years old. I thought of myself as stronger and braver than I was acting. I should know what to do. I should be strong enough to do it. But no matter how many times I had disarmed, thrown, or choked out attackers in the studio, nothing totally prepares you for the dread of a real-life situation. As the elevator reached my floor, I managed to snap out of my stupor long enough to dash through the door and run to my apartment unit. I nearly missed the keyhole, but I threw open my door. I was nearly through when my backpack snagged on the outside handle of the door, trapping me. I heard the man walking quickly to my door, a low chuckle building in his throat as he watched me panic and struggle to get free. I felt like a mouse being watched by a cat, trapped and helpless, so close to escaping. I finally gave up and shoved my arms through the straps, abandoning my backpack. As I did so, the man suddenly reached out for me. I was able to slam the door shut, deadbolting it. The gust of air from the door slamming brought his disgusting smell in with me, and in my terror and disgust, I retched violently. I looked through the peephole. He was staring right at me, pressing his forehead against the door, his mouth bent in a furious scowl. He swore at me and ripped my backpack off the handle of the door, slamming it to the ground. I winced as I heard my laptop thud. I was still too terrified to say anything, but I grabbed the knife I kept by my door in my hand, ready if he tried anything. After a few minutes of staring at my door, jiggling the handle, licking the peephole and making obscene motions at it, he unzipped my backpack, dumping its contents on the floor. He picked up my bag, sniffing it and leering at the peephole as he did so, like he knew I was watching him. I couldn't look away, again paralyzed in fear. Finally, he left, using the elevator visible from my door like nothing had happened. I continued to stare out the peephole for what felt like an eternity, and then finally called the apartment manager, feeling my anger sinking in that the security guard hadn't been anywhere in sight, not paying attention. It turns out he had fallen asleep eating Taco Bell and watching movies on his phone. He was only 10 feet away from the elevator the entire time, sleeping in the office behind a closed door. They fired him, but the creepy guy was never caught, and neither were any of the others. I don't even know for sure if this man was part of the original group. I was honestly too afraid to look much at their faces during the first incident. I moved out of my apartment a week later, staying with my boyfriend at the time for the remainder of my lease, and keeping Sesame with me at all times when possible. A few more things happened while I lived in that city, from having to call in a gunfight from outside my new apartment window, to having to pick up my friend who was being followed by a van, to having to evacuate during an arson incident. There are nice things about that city too, but during my time there, besides learning the police department was absolutely useless and corrupt, to nearly escaping with my life multiple times, I couldn't be happier to be far, far away from there, and doing a lot better with my fear and anxiety. When I was 19, I got really into clubbing. I went almost every other day. My younger friend who I had known in high school was turning 18 on Wednesday. She asked me to take her since I was already well versed in the club scene at this point and knew how to stay safe and have fun. The bar we went to just so happened to be my favorite bar's throwback night. They played 1990s to 2000s movies, and it always attracted a ton of people because the drinks were cheap and the music was good. When I met up with my friend, we drove to the bar about an hour earlier than we intended to go in so we could sit in my car and drink. We were both underage and live in the US. We had a good time, and I had a few seltzers since I had to drive us home and be sober in 3 hours. While we're sitting in my car, which was parked across the street from the bar, and the bar was next to a police station, I tell her I have a few rules for a safe clubbing experience. Number 1, no taking drinks from strangers, for obvious reasons. Number 2, no going to the bathroom alone, as I've noticed creepy men always target girls who are alone. Number 3, that neither of us were going to go home with anybody. We go in and have a good time. I met up with a guy I had recently been seeing. We danced and talked to people, and she had a few drinks. It hits 2 a.m. and they play closing time and kick everyone out. She starts talking to a guy she met at the bar and gets his number, and we start to leave. As we're walking toward the crosswalk, a man starts walking behind us and trying to talk to my friend. My friend is visibly drunk. I turn around and tell him to leave us alone because she just turned 18 and he looks like he's in his late 20s, early 30s, and also not drunk. He keeps talking to my friend, and she entertains him because, objectively, he's an attractive guy. He follows us all the way to my car, and then begins to ask for a ride. I tell him no, and he continued to beg, and even begins to tell me he'll pay me. I tell him to just pay an Uber and leave us alone. He still doesn't leave and keeps pestering me. At this point, I really want to leave because he's creeping me out and even starts creeping out my friend. I unlock the driver door and put my stuff in while still telling him to leave. I unlock the passenger door, which unlocks all the doors, and I tell my friend to get in the car. He then proceeds to completely change his demeanor and says, "Oh, thanks," and got in my back seat. I start screaming at him, telling him to get out of my car, and he steadfastly refuses and even starts becoming aggressive. At this point, I want to call the cops, and I ask my friend for her phone, since mine was on the fritz and not letting me make calls, and she tells me that her phone isn't working either. So I start glancing around, seeing if I can spot a police officer anywhere, since we are across the street from the police station, and there is not one in sight. I start panicking when I see the guy that I met up with that night getting into his Uber. I ran over to him quickly and tell him there's a man in my car who won't get out and that our phones aren't working. He tells his friends in the Uber to wait for him and walks back to my car with me. He starts yelling at the man to get out of my car, and the man starts yelling back while threatening to beat him up. He eventually gets out to try and fight him. The second he gets out of my car, I tell my friend to get in. We both get in and lock the doors while the man follows him back to his Uber, threatening to punch him in the head. He gets in his Uber and they drive away, and so do we, and the man was left standing in the road looking very angry. The next morning, I spoke to my mom, who was a prosecutor for 20 years. She tells me that she tried a case where 2 girls my age gave a guy a ride home from the bar, and he raped and murdered both of them. I didn't go clubbing for a while after that. I'll start by saying that nothing could have prepared me for what I was going to discover the morning after a night out. It started as every other night would. Me and my family got ready to head to our local bar for a fundraising event. I had just turned 18 and was looking to having a chill night with my friends and family. I knew most of the people there, so I was feeling really relaxed. While at the bar, I went to pay for my drink when the bartender told me it had already been paid for. When I went to see who had paid for it, I saw my cousin's partner. He is around 12 years older than me, give or take. I give him a quick wave, and we did the normal niceties like, "Hi, how are you doing?" It's important to note that I had barely spoken more than 2 words to him before, as he was usually quiet, or retreated to his room when we would go and visit my cousin. After saying thank you, I thought nothing of it. Nothing seemed off with our little interaction. By the end of the night, I had gathered my family together and told them I wanted to head home. At this point in time, I was still living at home with my mother. She had made plans to stay at my grandmother's that night, so I was going to go home and sleep. It was around 11:30 p.m., and I was outside having a smoke, about to head to my car. Just as I was about to head to my car, I heard someone call my name, so I turned to find my cousin's partner walking towards me. He asked if I was heading home for the night, which I thought was weird, so I said it's late, so I was calling it a night. Without skipping a beat, he mentioned the car that I drive and said he would see me around sometime. At this point, I got a bit creeped out, so I said goodnight and walked off to my car. There were plenty of people outside, so I wasn't concerned at all. Once I got in the car, my phone went off, and it was my mother. She was begging and pleading with me to go and stay at my grandmother's house for night, saying that she had a really bad feeling. Initially, I was really annoyed. I just wanted to go home and go to sleep in my own bed, but she insisted. I couldn't understand why. I was used to being alone at home at night, but she wouldn't let it go. I hung up and started driving home. I couldn't be bothered going to my grandma's when my home was just down the road. I was tired. I just wanted to go home. Not even halfway home, my phone went off, so I pulled over to check it. It was my sister asking me to please go stay at my grandma's house. I was pissed off at this point and decided it would just be easier going to my grandma's house instead of arguing with my family. When I got to my grandma's house, everyone was asleep. Now I was really pissed off and went straight to sleep. The night was uneventful, but I woke in the morning to my family talking about how they all had a feeling of dread, which is why they didn't want me to go home alone that night. My mother and I left for home at lunch. I felt off as soon as we pulled into the driveway. Once I got to the door, I found a police card wedged into the door to call them ASAP. I went inside and found my mother's camera on the kitchen table. This was a huge red flag, as it was in my bedroom before we left for the fundraiser. I went to my room to find my entire room had been ransacked. No other room in our house had been touched. My blankets had been pulled back, and it looked like someone had been in my bed. My knickers drawer was wide open, and some were also sprawled on the floor. Another camera of my mother's was also on the table where my TV was, which was directly opposite my bed. Clothes were everywhere. By this point, I was losing my crap. If I had gone home, like the plan all along, I would have made my way through the house and then crawled into bed without switching my lamp on. I had done this so many times previously, and I wouldn't have seen the state of my room at all. My mother gave them a call to find out what happened, and what she told me made the blood drain from my face. Police were alerted to a break-in at our next-door neighbor's house when our neighbors found a man wandering inside their house. The man claimed he was my friend and went into the wrong house, and they chased him out. Our house had a big 8 by 12 meter deck, which looked over my neighbor's house. They called police again when they spotted the same man having a smoke on our deck. Police arrived at our house at 2 a.m., but since I wasn't home, no one answered the door. They noticed the lights on, so they went inside to investigate. They made their way through the house and found a man hiding in my bedroom in the dark. He couldn't give a reason why he was there or why he was hiding in my room. They had arrested him and taken him to the station and wanted to know if we knew him. Turns out, it was my cousin's partner, and he had been hiding in my bedroom for over an hour waiting for me to get home because he knew I would be going home that night. My mother's gut feeling saved me from going home alone that night, and my neighbor's vigilance helped catch a creep. I always listen now without question whenever she has a bad feeling. Who knows what would have happened? All I know is it wouldn't have been pretty. He was charged with breaking and entering and spent some time in jail before being released and moving country. Always trust your mother's gut feeling, people. It sure saved me from having to deal with that.